here. All right, I think we have everyone now. Okay. Welcome everyone to Career Tracks in International Development at the BPIA conference, first virtual conference. I am Youshea. I will be moderating this session with our illustrious panelists. From my understanding, there were almost 300 individuals who had signed in to the conference for the plenary session, and from all over the world, apparently. So wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good night. Thank you for being here with us. I will take a moment to do some housekeeping. This session is being recorded for BPIA members to access on their portal at a future date. We also have the chat function, and most folks by now are familiar with using that for questions. So feel free to post your questions there. We want the session to be as informative as possible, as engaging as possible. Unfortunately, we can't see your faces. That would be wonderful, but since we can't, feel free to put something in the chat and let us know who you are, where you're viewing this session from, and a little bit about you. And I will try to track the questions there and also acknowledge those who have joined this evening. Also, I may, if there are questions that are posted, I may summarize them or group them together. And although you may not have heard me ask your specific question, please know that I will try to get to all the questions, even if I can summarize some of them that are similar in nature. Lastly, this session is scheduled to end at 7:25. I know we are starting a little bit late, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time and the other sessions that will happen after this one. And so we will try to keep to that schedule as much as possible. But also some of the panelists may be available at some of the other sessions or networking opportunities that are also on a function of this platform. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you to introduce this panel and hear from them this afternoon about some of their amazing experiences. As you can see, we have a powerhouse group of women here today on this panel, amazing careers. I'll just introduce them briefly and then give them an opportunity to share with you their background, their career path, their education, and then also provide some words of wisdom to you throughout the panel. So first, I'll start with my colleague, Alexious Butler, who is serving as the Development Diplomat in Residence for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and she is posted in at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll also go through the rest of the panelists, and then Alexious, I'll circle back to you so that you can start with your background introduction. Next, we have Charlotte Ashamu, who is a creative economy specialist at the African Museum Network. We also have Jazmian Ohanyere, who is an agriculture and resource economist at USAID. And finally, we have, last but not least, Macani Toungara, who's a manager of an international program at a private foundation. So please, without further ado, Alexious, if you'd start off just giving us a sense of who you are, how you got to where you are, and then we'll turn it over to those the other panelists in the same order that I just introduced them. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Youshea. As she said, my name is Alexious Butler, and I am currently the Development Diplomat in Residence based out of Morehouse College here in Atlanta. I've been with USAID for 14 years. My assignments have included being in the Africa Bureau in Washington, D.C., Afghanistan, Iraq, Bangladesh, South Sudan, Haiti, and then I've done other assignments in Liberia and Malawi. Botswana as well. So I've been able to travel quite a lot with my career. Prior to joining USAID, I was the country representative for the National Democratic Institute in Uganda, and I also worked with them in Kenya prior to that assignment. And I did about 10 years in the private sector, focusing on public relations and marketing. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from Duke University and my master's in international affairs from Georgia Tech. And then thanks to USAID, I also got a second master's from the Army War College most recently in strategic affairs. And so I'll hand it over to the rest of the panel. Or Charlotte's next, right? You're on mute, Charlotte.
Hit the microphone button.
Nope.
Charlotte, we may need you to try to go out and come back in and just add the audio and the microphone and see if that works. If not, we can try to troubleshoot that, okay? So we'll circle back to you and we'll move on to Jazmian.
Excellent. Yes, I am Jazmian Ohanyere. I also work for USAID. I am an agricultural economist and I work as an agriculture development officer. Currently, I am here in Accra, Ghana. This is my first post overseas. I have been with the agency since 2016. So this is the first post. This is a 4-year post for me. And I look forward to having a very long list of countries like my amazing colleague. A little bit about my history. International development was not my initial path. I had intentions of becoming a veterinarian. I went to Tuskegee University with the hopes of becoming a veterinarian. However, through a summer program, decided that that was not the career for me, which was great because nobody wants to make a long-term mistake of extra 4 years of school. So I actually ended up deciding to just stay at my university, which was Tuskegee University, and work on my master's degree in agricultural economics. And in that program, I was actually the only American in the program. And so it really was interesting, me being from Los Angeles and everybody being from so many other places. And my actual direct advisor worked for the World Bank for 30 plus years and retired and worked at my university. And he is actually the reason why I work in this field. He told me you can work in sustainable development. This resonates with me, working with people to help them help themselves. So it resonates so well with me that it just is something that has stuck. And I've done USAID, and before I worked for Peace Corps and also served as a Peace Corps volunteer. Thanks.
Charlotte.
Yes, hello. I think my microphone is now working.
Yes, it's
Good
working.
evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay. My name is Charlotte Ashamu. I'm currently based in Washington, D.C. I run my own consulting practice. I'm specialized in advisory services for foundations, corporations, cultural institutions with a specific interest in Africa's creative economy. Before I began running my own consulting practice, I had a 15-year career working across 2 development finance institutions. The first one was the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank. And then I was at the African Development Bank. In each of those institutions, I served in a variety of different management roles. And most of my work focused on, sorry about that. Most of my work focused on financing private sector businesses in different industries, from manufacturing to mining to oil. Before I began my career in development finance, I actually started out in Washington, D.C. And I started out working in international trade for the Whitaker Group and Apt Associates. My very first career experience in international affairs was an internship, which I received funding for to do with AfriCare in Dakar, Senegal. Similar to the other panelists, my background, my educational background is in international affairs. I am dual Nigerian American citizen, grew up in both West Africa and the United States, and also speak French. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Macani Toungara. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I currently work at a private foundation managing Africa programming. I run a leadership development program for 200 emerging leaders on the continent. It's work that I am very passionate about, as we try to invest in the people who are doing the work on the ground to improve their communities. Prior to moving into the leadership development space, I worked in international economic development for about 8 years, 8+ years, based in Accra, Ghana, covering West Africa before moving into the international economic development space. My expertise was program development, so designing programs, working with donors to get programs funded. And that's a part of the development space that I'm happy to talk about as part of this panel as well. Before that, I worked in management consulting. So I started my professional career as a management consultant before moving into the development space. So I'm also happy to talk about the career leaps into different sectors as part of my journey. Academically, I have an undergraduate degree in economics, a law degree, and a master's in public affairs with a specialization in international development. So also happy to discuss the whether or not to go to law school question and some other questions in terms of how degrees can affect your career. Very glad to be here. My background, I'm American, but I'm also from Côte d'Ivoire. And so definitely standing for the Ivorians in the audience, which there are probably none, but I'm going to say it anyway. So, over to you, Youshea.
Hi, we had a surprise, a Zoom bomb. Ricardo Michelle joined us. He is also a former colleague from USAID, just popped in, I guess, to say hello, and then left this and is joining his panel probably. But thank you all for your introductions. And I'm looking in the chat and I see a lot of connections there. We have folks from Los Angeles. We have undergrad student at Emory, interested in law. I graduated from Emory Law. I'm on the Emory Law board, alumni board. We have folks from working with consultants at the State Department International Visitor Leadership Program. We have someone in Canada who's studying economics and political politics at the University of Ottawa. We get shout outs to HBCUs representing Alexious. So we have a lot of good energy in the chat. Again, feel free to post any questions that you all may have from your own perspective, where you are in your career, and I'll relay those to our panelists. In the meantime, I think it'd be great to hear from you all on the panel about, and this is, again, one of those questions, just again, to kind of get folks thinking about your own experience. But one question that I know that as graduate students and as young professionals, folks struggle with is whether or not it's more important to be a specialist or a generalist, to focus on technical skills versus supervisory management skills. And so, for folks who are, again, really at the early stages of their career trajectory, do you all have any advice about moving and thinking about their own path? Feel free to jump in.
So I'll start. So I have always been more of a generalist. I am more of a big picture person. I've always liked to think about the ways all the systems fit together. And so there was never one specific area that was necessarily my passion. So I think that for people who are just starting out in their careers, I don't think they should worry so much about becoming a specialist in one specific thing. I think it's important to think about the totality of experiences that are helping to build them as professionals. Being a strong manager, strong team player, I mean, those are all important skills to have and, and build as you build your career. But it's also important to think about, all the different aspects of any one subject that you can target. So to use an example from my career, I was interested in international development, but I started my career as a management consultant. And so that is the ultimate generalist career. You do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I was in business, but I was doing consumer goods, financial services, like all kinds of different sectors. And so when I decided to shift into the international development space, it was hard because I wasn't an expert in pineapples. But unless you're super passionate about like pineapples or, papaya or whatever your sector is, horticulturalists, most of you won't have that one specific expertise. But, for me, I was able to go into the program development space. So writing proposals, designing programs, using the skills that I brought, because I was able to think about what partnerships would be effective. I was able to write. I was able to engage with donors and engage with partners in the way that I engaged my clients in management consulting. And so that generalist skill set still took me into the development space, even though I had to find the right space for me in order to make that leap professionally. And then using that, when I moved into the leadership development space, I wasn't an expert in leadership development, but I had a lot of other skills and I had networks on the continent and other things that helped me to make that leap. So I don't think it's so much important to think about one thing to specialize in as it is so much thinking about what do you like to do? Where are the spaces where you can do that work? Because there's no one job or one institution that's going to provide that experience. And to think broadly about moving through those different institutions and spaces in order to get that totality of experience. And that'll lay the groundwork for your future professional career.
I will agree and slightly disagree. I have been interested in politics and political development for my entire academic and professional life. So there was nothing else I wanted to do. And sorry, my dog is now asking for attention. And so I focused my entire career on doing just those things. I studied political science when I was an undergrad. And I thought that the way to get engaged in those types of things would be to do public affairs type work. And so that's why I ended up doing public relations. But, that wasn't necessarily the sector it wasn't as specific as I wanted it to be, quite honestly. I did get an opportunity to travel internationally while I was doing that. And that really sealed for me the idea that I wanted to do some sort of political development work internationally. And I still didn't quite know how to do that. And so that's why I went back to grad school in order to be able to help cement that idea and to give myself a bit more time to be able to move into that field, because it is a specialized field and a lot of us know each other within that field. But at the same time, there are a lot of paths that you can go to in international development. Jazmian is an agricultural specialist. I'm a democracy and governance specialist. We have people within USAID who are environment specialists. And those people all spend a good deal of their time in their career on perfecting their craft and what they study and what they're implementing in the field. And depending on where you work, you can take that specialization and turn it into a leadership position within an organization like USAID, right? So your potential, I like to say, is really only limited by your own imagination. If you want to become an ambassador as a USAID Foreign Service Officer, that is a possibility. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's really difficult, it's really challenging. If it's something that you want, then, speak it and own it and make it happen. Because we have had many Foreign Service officers who've taken that route, which I would say up until 20 years ago was unheard of, that you would have a USAID Foreign Service officer appointed as ambassador. And so, so you've got two sides. You've got the generalist side and you've got the specialist side. And so I don't think you can go wrong with choosing either of those. They're just two different options.
I just want to
Yeah, I would like to add that, You know, I've worked in 2 large institutions, and within those 2 large institutions, there were numerous opportunities to learn. Even though I wasn't a specialist in a particular area, the organizations had learning opportunities and assignments that allowed me to develop more in-depth knowledge and skills. For instance, I took a job at the International Finance Corporation 2 years outside of graduate school, landed in Johannesburg. 2 weeks later, I was in Angola, helping to assess a cement factory that IFC was considering investing in. I knew nothing about the cement factory. I knew nothing about Angola, and I certainly didn't speak Portuguese. But to Macani's point about just the general basket of skills that that most young professionals have in project management, writing, communications, that general basket of skills allowed me to work effectively on most projects. And then as I worked on projects, I would develop more specialized knowledge and skills. I'd say one of the most critical experiences that really helped grow and further my career was work experience in Africa. You know, and there are often debates I get into about friends, about the value of field experience versus headquarters experience. And I'd say in my career, what's really made the difference is having on-ground experiences, direct experiences working with companies, government officials, leaders in various sectors, as opposed to having it from a distance or sitting in Washington, assessing or looking at a program. On-ground experience really makes a difference in a number of career pursuits in international development.
I come in and echo Alexious in terms of for me, I feel it's important to have the specialty. However, to be very flexible to go anyway. So with me as being an agriculturalist, currently right now I'm working on a Feed the Future initiative, which has a component of nutrition. I do not have a background in nutrition whatsoever. However, I am educating myself enough to be able to lead a project in nutrition. And the same thing with management. Even though I am an agriculturalist, I am making sure that I am getting educated on the different areas and being able to be at the front of the table and have the opportunities to grow just as any other generalist, which usually move kind of faster in the USAID, up the ladder in USAID. Just a very quick plug, USAID is in the process of hiring. We are looking for more officers. So this is a great opportunity to take your skills as a generalist and maybe become a specialist and go into those areas or vice versa. So either way, whichever your passion is, make a decision. Once that decision is made, follow it. Follow your dream, period.
Thank you. I think that's been very good advice about being flexible, following your passion, getting on the ground experience. We do have a question about fellowships and internships and some of the practical programs that are available to students to help them get the skill set that you've talked about, whether it's, and I know that Jenny, you were in the Peace Corps previously. If you all could just talk about 1 or 2 programs maybe that you've participated in, that you're aware of, that you can share with the folks that have joined today, that has been pivotal or instrumental in your own career, whether it's building your network, building your technical experience, any of those sort of things that might be something that these young professionals should be aware of. And you know, you don't have to go into too much detail, but you know, we can put them on. I can add them to the chat if you just provide the name and a little bit about why it was important to your career path, or why it can open up a door for those who are interested in moving into careers in this field. Charlotte, do you mind if we start with you?
Start. I think a key entry point for me has been through professional development programs, specifically fellowships. And each of the institutions that I work for, the World Bank Group and the African Development Bank Group, each have fellowship opportunities for young professionals. I personally didn't apply and pursue that route. I applied to several different fellowships outside of the organizations where I worked, one of which is a fellowship that's funded by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. Mo Ibrahim is a billionaire philanthropist based in London, and every year he gives a fellowship to several professionals to work at different institutions. And I applied and got that fellowship, which enabled me to start my work at the African Development Bank in the president's office. And it was key in terms of not just giving me exposure at the executive level of an institution, but in terms of opening up my networks across the world and across the African continent. So I'd say fellowship and professional development programs, and I'll be happy to post a couple in the chat.
Macani, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. So, like I said, I took a much more detoured way to get to the international affairs space. As a matter of fact, I went from consulting, went and did my degree in international development, went back to consulting before moving into the development space. But I think one of the experiences that was most valuable for me, actually while I was in law school, was interning at the House Foreign Affairs Committee on the Hill. So getting, and in that position, I was lucky enough to be able to work on the PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS and malaria.
AIDS relief.
And in that role, really exposed me to sort of the policy side of international development and sort of what is legislation supporting U.S. foreign policy and development policy, and gave me a sense of also what was happening on the Hill, as an entry point into what was happening in the development space. So as you think about, and then especially for those of you in graduate school, the types of experiences that can help you to think about where you want to go next, I think reaching out for those types of externship opportunities, understanding policy can definitely add value and sort of round out, whatever experiences you're doing, whether you're in law school or getting a policy degree or anything else that is a specialized degree. So that, in particular, that externship was really shaped what I thought I'd want to do longer term with my career before I went back into to work while I was in law school.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add?
One of the things that I'm doing in my current job is recruitment, particularly for underrepresented groups. And so I want to put a plug in for the Payne Fellowship, which provides about $96,000 for the pursuit of a master's degree. And then following completion of your master's degree, you would be eligible to become a foreign service officer with USAID. And your commitment beyond that period of time is 5 years. So you must stay with USAID for 5 years beyond that period. And it's a fantastic degree program. And I think it's one that we are trying to do better about getting the word out that that's happening. And there is a booth if you go into the expo session where you can speak to other recruiters about that fellowship, as well as about other employment opportunities similar to the ones that Jazmian already talked about with USAID. We also have paid internships. And so I encourage you, if you're interested in working with USAID or in transitioning into civil service or the foreign service, to take a visit to that booth. And so I just wanted to put a plug in for that.
So really briefly, I just want to go into about Peace Corps. So for me, I did serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in Malawi. However, the only reason why I served as a Peace Corps volunteer was because I did an internship with USAID before while I was in graduate school, and I determined that this was a career path that I wanted. However, I did not have overseas experience. And although my fellow colleagues on this wonderful panel had a lot of great opportunities to get overseas, me as a specialist in agriculture, specifically, I worked a lot with goats. So I really did livestock a lot. So to have that specialty and be applying to so many positions overseas and not getting an opportunity, I decided to make create my own opportunity. So I went to the Peace Corps, not really even knowing what the Peace Corps was. My university, they never came to Tuskegee while I was in undergrad. I had no idea what it was. I just knew it would give me 2 years overseas experience, which would get me to the career that I wanted. And I went blindly, which was, it had this plus and minuses. I was in a very rural community. It was very difficult. I'm from a major city. It's difficult to go from major city to no running water, no electricity, pooping in a hole. So, however, I was able to adapt. Everybody is able to adapt, and it gave me the 2+ years that I needed. However, going along the lines of, having a goal set and making sure that you are doing something that means something to you, and resonating with my people. I decided after a Peace Corps volunteer to be a recruiter and then a placement officer, because I did not feel that Peace Corps was representing America abroad. The majority of Peace Corps volunteers are Caucasian Americans. And in my experience, it was 150 volunteers and 5 Black people. And for me, that was not okay. So although that was in my path, it was something I felt I needed to do. So I focused on that for 4 years, and then continued with my ultimate goal. So Peace Corps is a great way to get your toe overseas and really experience something at the grassroots, because when you come into USAID, we're not working at the grassroots. And even myself right now, I'm working at the regional level. So I work all the way at policy. I'm not even at the national level. So it is a vast difference, but it gives you a great opportunity.
I wanted to actually add one more thing to the list of things people should consider, and that's the Presidential Management Fellowship. So I did my law degree and policy degree joint, so I couldn't go straight from my policy degree into that program, but a lot of my policy classmates did. So Presidential Management Fellowship is a great way to go from grad school into government. And it's a really strong program. So I encourage those of you who are looking to government to seriously consider that.
Thank you. Jazmian, did you want to add something?
No, I was just reading the comments. They said they couldn't hear me.
Okay. I think we resolved that. We did get some great questions for individuals who are thinking about transitioning to foreign service, which could be obviously at the State Department, at USAID, at the Department of Agriculture. I think a participant wanted to know if you had any advice about joining the Foreign Service. Alexious, I know you had mentioned the Payne Fellowship Program as one of the on-ramps to USAID. Did anyone else want to provide any advice or thoughts about a trajectory into foreign service from this point in early career? Macani, it looks like you wanted to add something there.
I would actually encourage people to consider the U.S. Department of Agriculture also has a foreign agricultural service branch. And so as you're thinking about entry points, I mean, most people know about the State Department and USAID, but there are foreign service officers in other departments as well. So as you're thinking about where your interests lie, if you are interested in agriculture, going into USDA as well, and then going from USDA into the Foreign Ag Service is another way to potentially access opportunities abroad. So I think it's important to think about all the different branches of the Foreign Service and where your interests lie, and to think more expansively about the different entry points as well.
Alexious?
Yeah, commerce also has a foreign service component. So there are a lot of different things in Treasury, DOJ. There's a lot of different opportunities within the government for international work. And so I think sometimes you have to do a good deal of legwork and research in order to get to these opportunities. But I usually give out my email address, and I'm happy to give it out here to anyone who wants, to kind of brainstorm other ideas. One thing that I like to put a plug in for, quite honestly, are nonprofit organizations. because that was really that was the way that I was able to actually go internationally before joining USAID. And the pay is not very good often, but the work is almost always very satisfying and fulfilling. And there's a lot of them that are out there that are constantly looking for people. And it was always amazing to me how non-diverse the NGO sector, at least on the political development side, was. And so, just take a look at what organizations are out there working in the areas that you want to work. Maybe you want to focus on a particular region, and there'll be organizations that are specifically dedicated, let's say, to the Caribbean or to South Asia or something like that. So just take a look broadly at what the opportunities are out there.
I also wanted to add that, when I was starting my career in international affairs, I thought that my options were essentially the Foreign Service, a few big international institutions, and NGOs. I wasn't aware about all the opportunities in international foundations, increasingly international corporations that have really interesting practices in corporate social responsibility, government affairs. So there's really just a broad range of opportunities across international affairs, and it's a matter of identifying first what the issues, the topics, maybe the regions of the world that you're most interested in, and who the players are operating in those areas. But don't limit yourself at all just to State Department or Foreign Service roles. There are a broad range of opportunities in international affairs.
Could you all just speak a little bit about how important it is to have a second language in order to join the Foreign Service, or to have had some experience living abroad or a summer abroad, study abroad, et cetera, or whether or not it's possible to get language training when you join the agency, et cetera?
So I'll start with that because that is something that's very near and dear to my heart. In my undergrad experience and in my master's, all of my education, I never studied another language. And that really was a handicap to me. And in this position that I am here, in this regional position, French was a requirement. And that was a training that I did undergo through USAID. And it was a very difficult journey for me. It was very difficult and not something I wish on anyone. So I definitely encourage people to, if you are very interested in working in foreign affairs in general, it's good to have another language, because even if you have any type of romantic language, it's easier maybe to pick up another one opposed to having nothing, like myself, where you have to struggle. And the way that you learn when you're in training for us is to do your job. You're not learning it to be a great speaker. So my level is from basic to very high level, having a debate. Whereas that middle portion where I really feel that
ordering in a restaurant.
Exactly. That is a part that I'm missing, but I can give you a great lecture on environmental education. But I think it's just important to have a ground, a base, and it will really help you in this career. And if you're in USAID, if you're in, if you're in foreign service, or even if you're working in NGOs, it's just beneficial. You're more marketable when you have a language.
I would completely agree with what Jazmian said. I think that the ability to learn a foreign language makes your life so much easier. And in a lot of countries you'll be in, USAID won't necessarily train you to learn that language, but you want to be able to communicate. When I was living in Uganda, this was before I joined USAID, I made an effort, because I was also in Kenya, to learn Swahili so I could communicate with the people around me and order that meal in the restaurant. But I came into the agency already having some French. And so it made the transition much easier for me, because the French program that we go through is not easy. And so I feel for you, Jazmian. But at the same time, I was in the agency for almost 10 years, 12 years before I even went to a French-speaking country. And so I wasn't able to use it for a while. And then by that point, I'm in a groove. Now I got to go back and relearn this language. So, you know, it's good to keep it up. And like I said, the ability to be able to learn language makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, and it looks like we have a number of returned Peace Corps volunteers on this call that are giving shout outs to Jazmian. And then we do have a couple questions that I'll group together. And really they center around leveraging and pivoting. How do you leverage your skill set from that you developed being in the Peace Corps? How do you pivot from a job in recruitment to being in the field? How do you pivot if you're in a different field now to civil service positions and international development? So a number of questions in those areas. And I just want to turn it over to whoever wants to jump in and answer that from their own lens.
So I can start because I did do that step from Peace Corps volunteer to working with Peace Corps to coming into USAID. And for me, I think along the way, it gives you so many excellent skills that help you regardless in what you're doing. In working as a volunteer, you learn how to manage a project. You learn how to create a project from nothing by working with your community and finding out what their needs are. In being a recruiter, you learn how to talk effectively, essentially your resume, and speak clearly so people can understand how to be most effective in getting into Peace Corps. And then here in working as an officer, I have the opportunity to use a collaboration of all those skills. Being a Foreign Service officer on a regular basis, we have to speak to our implementing partners, the people that we work with, and we need to be able to articulate the words that we're saying. We need to be able to understand what they're doing on the ground, even though we might not necessarily be there. So if you have something that resonates with you, something that you have done already in the past, and you can think that through because you have actually worked on it, you can have conversations and saying,